There's something about that night I'll never be able to explain. No one believes me, not even the people who were there. They laugh about it now. My friends roll their eyes when I bring it up, dismissing me as if I'm overreacting. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. It was just supposed to be a sleepover, a low-key Friday night to celebrate Megan's birthday. Her parents were gone for the weekend, off to some remote cabin by the lake, which meant her house was empty, and, more importantly, we could do whatever we wanted. We'd talked about it all week, about movies and snacks, about all the usual sleepover stuff. By the time Friday came around, it felt like the highlight of our summer. The house was quiet when we arrived, dark except for the faint light spilling out of the kitchen where Megan had left a few snacks on the counter. It's strange now looking back, how empty it felt, even when we were all together in that small living room. But in the moment, it just felt exciting. A night with no parents, no rules. The plan was simple. We'd stay up all night watching scary movies, do our nails, and talk until we couldn't keep our eyes open. It was all so normal. But if I'd known what was going to happen that night, I wouldn't have gone through with it. I would have stayed home, safe in my bed, pretending I was sick. But that's the thing. I didn't know. The evening started as planned, with us sprawled across Megan's living room floor, blankets and pillows piled around us. We'd been watching some horror movie, not really paying attention, more focused on trying not to spill the giant bowl of popcorn as we passed it around. I remember it so clearly, like a snapshot burned into my mind. Megan's laugh, the way Sarah kept squealing and covering her eyes, Jenna trying to act like she wasn't scared. After a couple of hours, we took a break. Megan headed to the kitchen to get drinks, and I followed her, mostly just to stretch my legs. The rest of the girls stayed behind, still scrolling through Megan's endless list of horror films. "I think I heard something outside," Megan said as she reached into the fridge. I looked at her, eyebrow raised. "Don't start with the spooky stuff," I warned. "You're going to freak everyone out before we even get to the good movies." She smirked, but her eyes darted toward the window, her fingers tight on the bottle of soda. I glanced out, trying to see whatever she'd noticed. Her backyard was huge, mostly unkempt, leading into a narrow patch of woods. The moon was barely visible through the clouds, casting faint shadows that wavered in the wind. There was nothing there, just branches rustling and leaves skittering across the grass. "Probably just the wind," I said, trying to sound dismissive. But Megan kept staring out that window as if expecting to see something. After a long, tense silence, she finally nodded and turned back to the living room, shaking it off with a laugh. But there was something in her face, a nervousness and unease, that left me unsettled. By midnight, everyone was tired but trying to keep the energy up. We'd abandoned the horror movies, opting instead for games, truth or dare mostly, with Megan asking questions designed to embarrass us all. It was innocent enough, just silly fun. But then Sarah dared Megan to take us upstairs and show us her parents' bedroom. Megan hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face before she shrugged it off and led us upstairs. Her parents' room was pristine, everything in its place, the bed neatly made. But there was a heaviness in the air, a stillness that made my skin prickle. I remember looking at the family photos on the dresser, rows of smiling faces in identical frames. It should have felt normal, but it didn't. "Okay, can we go back downstairs now?" Jenna asked, her voice a little too loud, a little too eager. Megan laughed, but it sounded forced. We turned to leave, but just as we reached the doorway, there was a noise, a soft creak from somewhere down the hall. We froze, every muscle tensing. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, eyes wide. We all heard it. Megan tried to laugh it off, said it was probably just the house settling. But as we made our way back downstairs, every shadow seemed darker, every creak louder. We were all on edge, nerves frayed and raw. When we finally settled back into the living room, no one mentioned what had happened. But none of us could shake it, that feeling of being watched. As we settled back into the living room, the atmosphere was charged with an unease that none of us wanted to acknowledge. Jenna had fallen asleep on the couch, her breathing slow and steady. Sarah was scrolling through her phone, only half listening to the conversation. I leaned against the wall, staring at the TV but not really seeing it. Megan started telling a story about a creepy old house near her school, one that was supposedly haunted. I rolled my eyes but listened, my mind still wandering back to that strange creak we'd heard. It was late, the darkness pressing in on us, and I felt the weight of it sitting heavy in my chest. "Okay, so one time my friend Lily and I went there to check it out," Megan said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "We thought we heard someone inside." "Stop it," I said, though I was intrigued. "You're just going to scare everyone." "Whatever, it's true," she insisted, her eyes wide. "We heard footsteps and then a door slammed and we ran so fast." Suddenly there was a loud crash from upstairs. We all jumped and Sarah nearly dropped her phone. "What was that?" she gasped. "Maybe it was just the wind?" I suggested weakly, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. "No," Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That came from my parents' room." Another crash followed, this time sounding like something heavy had fallen. My heart raced, and I could feel the panic rising in my throat. "What do we do?" Jenna mumbled, half asleep, rubbing her eyes. "We should check it out," Megan said, her bravado faltering as she stood up. I could see the fear written across her face, the way her hands trembled. "Are you crazy? We can't just go up there," I protested, looking toward the staircase. The shadows loomed dark and foreboding, swallowing up the light from the living room. "We can't just ignore it either," she shot back. I felt trapped, torn between my instincts to flee and the pull of curiosity. In the end, it was that curiosity that won out, and before I knew it, we were all standing at the bottom of the staircase, the air thick with tension. As we made our way up, the atmosphere shifted. The house felt alive, each creak of the floorboards echoing in the silence. We reached the top and Megan slowly pushed open her parents' bedroom door. It swung open with a groan, revealing a dark space. "Hello?" Megan called out, her voice shaky. "Is anyone there?" We waited, hearts pounding, but only silence answered us. I stepped into the room, eyes scanning the space for any sign of disturbance. Everything seemed in order, furniture untouched, nothing out of place. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but the knot in my stomach remained. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, but my voice wavered. "Let's just go back downstairs," Sarah suggested, her anxiety palpable. But just as we turned to leave, a sudden loud crash echoed from the attic above us. We froze again, fear wrapping around us like a cold, wet blanket. "Is someone up there?" Megan asked, her eyes wide. "Let's go check," Jenna said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Are you kidding?" I whispered urgently. "That's a bad idea." But it was too late. Megan had already started toward the attic door, a small wooden hatch at the end of the hallway. She pulled down the rickety stairs and a wave of dust cascaded down. "We should call the cops," I urged, but my voice sounded distant, muffled by the thudding of my heart. "We're not waiting," Megan said firmly, determination flashing in her eyes. As she climbed the stairs, I felt a cold sweat down my back. Something was wrong. I looked back at Sarah and Jenna, who were both staring at the attic door with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Maybe we should wait down here," Sarah suggested, but it was too late. Megan had disappeared into the attic. "Let's go," I said, but as I started to climb the stairs after her, Jenna grabbed my arm. "What if something's up there?" "That's exactly why we need to go. What if she needs us?" I pulled away and climbed the last few steps, heart racing. The attic was dark, lit only by the faint glow of Megan's phone. The space was cramped, filled with boxes and old furniture covered in dusty sheets. My pulse quickened as I peered into the shadows, searching for any sign of her. "Megan?" I called out, voice echoing against the wood. "Over here," she replied, her voice shaky. I turned to find her near a window, her face pale as she stared out into the darkness. "Look," she said, pointing. "There's something moving out there." I stepped closer, squinting into the shadows outside. The trees swayed in the wind, their branches casting eerie shapes against the moonlit sky. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then, just as I was about to dismiss her, a figure moved, a dark silhouette slipping between the trees. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. "What was that?" I asked, suddenly feeling sick. "I don't know," Megan said, her voice trembling. "It looked like a person." Before I could respond, there was another loud crash from downstairs, and we all jumped, hearts pounding. "We need to get out of here," Jenna said urgently, but just as we turned to leave, the attic door slammed shut, the sound echoing like thunder. "What the hell?" I shouted, rattling the handle. It wouldn't budge. "Megan!" Sarah cried out. "Open it!" "I'm trying!" she yelled, panic rising in her voice. I pushed against the door, but it felt as if something was holding it shut from the other side. We were trapped. "Someone's messing with us," Jenna said, her voice rising in fear. "This isn't funny." "Can't we break a window or something?" I suggested, looking around frantically. "Are you crazy?" Megan shouted. "There's no way out. We have to get out of here." The air grew thick with desperation as we banged on the door, yelling for help. The sound of our pounding echoed through the attic, but it felt futile. I was losing hope, the darkness pressing in on me, tightening around my chest. Then, from below, we heard a loud thud, heavy footsteps stomping around the living room. I froze, blood running cold. Whatever was down there was real, and it was getting closer. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, eyes wide with fear. "We have to hide," Megan said, looking around desperately. She pointed to a large cardboard box near the window. "Get in there." "No way," I protested, panic clawing at my throat. "Megan, there's something down there," I said, my voice trembling. "We can't just wait." But Megan's eyes were filled with a wild determination. "If we can't get out, we have to hide until someone comes to find us." The footsteps grew louder, and I felt my heart racing. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but fear rooted me to the spot. We climbed into the box, our breaths shallow as we pulled the flap shut, plunging ourselves into darkness. The world outside felt distant, muffled by the cardboard walls. I could hear the thud of my heart, the ragged breaths of my friends. The footsteps grew closer, echoing through the living room. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the shadow of a figure loomed just beneath the attic stairs. I held my breath, fingers clenched tightly around the edge of the box. Suddenly, the door to the attic creaked open, and I squinted through the small gap in the box. The figure appeared, tall and imposing, the silhouette outlined by the dim light from the hallway. It was a man, his face hidden in shadow, but I could feel the menace radiating from him. "Hello," he called out, voice low and gravelly. My breath hitched in my throat. He stepped inside and I felt my heart stop. He was wearing a long coat, the hem brushing against the floor, and his hair hung disheveled over his face. He looked wild, unkempt, and utterly terrifying. "Megan," Sarah whispered, voice barely audible. "Shh," Megan hissed, panic overtaking her. The man moved deeper into the attic, searching, rifling through the boxes and belongings. I felt my skin crawl, every instinct screaming at me to escape, to run, but there was nowhere to go. "Where are you?" he called out, voice echoing eerily in the silence. He paused, listening, and my heart raced as I feared he could hear our quickened breaths. He took a step closer to us, and I could see the glint of something in his hand, a knife. "Please don't," I thought, my mind racing with fear. I could feel the heat of Megan beside me, the tension thick in the air. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but I was frozen in place, trapped in the suffocating darkness. He continued to search the attic, opening boxes and knocking things over, his movements erratic. "You can't hide forever," he taunted, laughter mingling with a sense of danger. I wanted to cry out, wanted to tell him to leave us alone, but fear held my voice hostage. We were stuck in that box, trapped in our own little world, and all we could do was listen as he grew closer. "Megan," I finally whispered, the desperation spilling out. "What do we do?" She shook her head, fear evident in her eyes. We wait. We have to wait for him to leave. But deep down, I knew we couldn't stay hidden forever. We needed a plan, a way out. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Suddenly, the man stopped in front of the box. I know you're in there, he said, voice low and menacing. You can't hide from me. My stomach churned as he knelt down, peering through the small gap in the cardboard. I held my breath, heart pounding as I tried to remain as still as possible. Then, with a sudden movement, he ripped open the box, the cardboard tearing like paper. I gasped, scrambling back, panic overwhelming me as I stared up at him. Megan! I screamed, pushing past the others to get away, but there was nowhere to go. The man reached for me, a twisted smile on his face. Suddenly there was a loud crash from below and the man froze, looking back toward the doorway. Stay here, he commanded, voice sharp. I took the opportunity and bolted, pushing past him, sprinting toward the attic door. Megan! I yelled, desperately scrambling down the stairs, my heart racing as I heard footsteps behind me. I flew down the hallway, flinging myself into the living room. The house was dark, shadows dancing along the walls, but I could see the front door standing ajar. I dashed toward it, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Just as I reached the door, a hand clamped down on my shoulder, and I screamed, twisting away. Megan! I cried out, fear clawing at my throat as I spun around to face him. The man stood there, eyes wide with fury, his expression twisted in rage. But before he could grab me again, I ducked and ran outside, the night air hitting me like a slap to the face. I sprinted across the yard, my heart pounding, lungs burning as I raced toward the trees. Megan, Sarah, Jenna, I shouted, but there was no response. The darkness swallowed my voice, leaving me feeling utterly alone. I could hear footsteps behind me, the sound of him chasing me, and I pushed myself harder, desperate to escape. I ducked into the trees, branches clawing at my arms as I stumbled through the underbrush, trying to put as much distance as possible between us. But the man was close. Too close. I could hear him crashing through the brush, his footsteps growing louder, echoing in the stillness of the night. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, fear tightening its grip around me. Then ahead I saw a light flickering through the trees, a street lamp on the edge of the road. I sprinted toward it, my heart racing as I burst into the clearing, desperately glancing over my shoulder. He was still coming, shadows moving behind me. I reached the road, legs screaming as I stumbled toward the light, hope surging in my chest. But just as I reached it, I turned to look back, and he was gone. Gone. I spun around, breathing heavily, scanning the darkness for any sign of him. But there was nothing, just the stillness of the night, the rustling of leaves. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, mixed with confusion. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket and I fumbled to pull it out. It was a message from Sarah. We're safe. We called the cops. Where are you? I quickly typed back, trying to explain what had happened. I'm by the streetlight. He chased me. I think I lost him. Just as I hit send, I heard footsteps again, heavy, thudding steps coming from behind me. My heart sank. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The man stood at the edge of the clearing, his face half hidden in shadow, a twisted grin spreading across his lips. He was no longer chasing, he was waiting. Where are your friends? He taunted, stepping closer. I backed away, fear paralyzing me. Stay back, I shouted, panic overwhelming me. Why don't you come back inside? We were just having fun, he said, voice dripping with mockery. Just then I saw headlights in the distance, the glow of police lights flashing through the trees. Relief flooded through me, but I knew I had to hold out until they arrived. I took a step back, heart racing, ready to run again, when suddenly the man lunged at me, arms outstretched. I dodged, adrenaline surging through my veins as I sprinted away from him. I heard sirens in the distance, my heartbeat thundering in my ears as I ran toward the road, desperate to get to safety. But he was fast, closing in on me, and just as I reached the edge of the clearing, he grabbed my arm, yanking me back. Let go of me! I screamed, fighting against him, but his grip was like iron. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled, and in that moment, I thought it was over. But then I heard the sirens growing louder and I kicked and clawed at him, desperate to break free. Just as I thought I was going to be pulled back into the darkness, the police lights exploded into view, illuminating the clearing with blinding brightness. "Freeze!" a voice shouted, and I felt the man's grip loosen just enough for me to break away. I stumbled toward the road, throwing myself into the arms of the police officer just as the man turned to flee, but it was too late. The officers tackled him to the ground, wrestling him into cuffs as I gasped for air, shaking. "What happened?" the officer asked, looking at me with concern. I don't know," I stammered, trying to catch my breath. "He was in the house. He was waiting for us." The officers nodded, taking my statement as I watched them lead the man away, the realization washing over me. Megan, Sarah, and Jenna rushed toward me, fear etched on their faces. "We thought you were gone," Sarah cried, wrapping her arms around me tightly. "I thought I lost you guys," I said, voice trembling as I clung to them. "We're all safe now," Megan said, her voice shaking. But even as we stood there, the weight of the night settling around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I looked back at the man being led away, a twisted grin still etched on his face, and my stomach churned. What had just happened? I was alive, but I couldn't escape the darkness that lingered in my mind. As the police began to investigate the house, I knew that whatever had happened that night would stay with me forever. A haunting echo in the shadows, a reminder that sometimes the darkness holds things far worse than we can imagine. They laughed at me when I told them the story, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I'll never forget that night.